Genesis chapter 7, verse 21. In the prior verses, we've seen the flood waters inundate the earth up to the height above the mountains. Now we're going to see the devastating impact of all of that water upon life on earth. Okay, apathanin, pasa sarx kenumene, epites ges, ton patenon, kai ton katenon, kai ton therion, kai pan herpaton, kenumenon, epites ges, ke pan anthropos. As we go, we're going to try to bring out some of the structure of this, because once you realize what's going on, some of the harder bits and the participles and so forth will fall into place. Well, first off, we'll notice that it begins with chi, of course. That just is linking back to verse 20, extending the narrative. The first verb here is apathanin. That is a third singular aorist active indicative from apathnesko. It is a stem change, or what some call a second aorist. It goes to apathan, third singular ending there with the en. And so someone has died, and it's all pasa sarx. And so notice the pasa here is matching up with sarx in terms of being feminine. So all flesh died. But then we have a modifier, an adjectival modifier that's a participle here. It's adjectival participle from kineo. This is a nominative singular feminine present middle participle. It means to move about, to stir about. And so you'll notice with that feminine ending, it is also modifying sarx. So it's all flesh moving about, and it's moving about upon the earth. So that's the main statement that we kick off with. Everything has died that is upon the earth. But what's interesting is that the Genesis translator is going to modify the different categories that fall into this sarx description. And this is going to be a little bit different than what we see with the Masoretic. And the translator does it with essentially a chi chain. You see the chi here and the chi here of using genitives. Notice that genitive plural ending for all of these to kind of stack up what are the different types of things that we're talking about. The first one is the patenon. Now that is from the word for bird. This is the genitive plural for bird. A little bit odd that they describe birds as moving about upon the earth. Now, don't think they're only talking about penguins and ostriches, but it's just a general sense of what's happening, and presumably because their food supply has dwindled up and so forth, so they die, even though I suppose for a while they could survive the flood waters. Then we have the katenon here, and we've seen that word before. It's from katenos. That typically refers to domesticated animals, often cattle. And then we have the kai therion, so that's from therion. That's going to refer to basically the non-domesticated animals, the wild beasts and so forth. And so that pair has shown up multiple times already in Genesis, just contrasting the domesticated animals like cattle and so forth with the wild beasts. And so these are the three different things that describe these sarx. Notice they're all genitive plural with that omega no ending. Then you move to yet another category, which is all the herpaton. Notice that is actually in the nominative as opposed to the genitive for these others. These are all genitive. So it is moving to a slightly different category. We're back to a nominative just like we had with the sarx, and it also has the pos in front of it. It happens to be neuter. Herpaton is going to be something like a reptile, those that crawl. Not really sure why they would draw this out as a distinct category. But the verb here is once again a form of kineo, but in this case it's the neuter form. So it's the reptiles that are moving about upon the earth. Now the Masoretic actually has a different verb here. It has something more to the effect of crawling. It's basically the crawlers who crawl. And some scholars argue that the Genesis translator, and by the way, this verb in the Masoretic is not the same as the one that is used up here for moving about. And that could have been the reason that the Genesis translator has, in effect, divided things up. In the Masoretic, you'll see that all four categories, that is the birds, the cattle, if you want to call it that, the wild beast, and the reptiles, are all treated in the same way semantically. They're just like a four-part subject. But we've seen that that's not true here in the Septuagint, because you have this movement from the genitive ending to this neuter nominative. And it could have been prompted by their decision to use the same verb here as opposed to distinguish them, which in turn leads to, okay, we got to somehow divide one group of beings that are kenumenosing, if you will, from another group of beings that are using the same verb. So I find that to be pretty plausible. The net effect is the same, but I just wanted to draw that out because otherwise some of the syntax, especially in this bit here, will be a little bit confusing. Anyway, back to the point at hand. It's the reptiles who are moving about upon the earth, and then he says, and every man, all of mankind has also now died. And so you've got different categories of animals, plus the birds, you got the reptiles, and you have mankind. Now, I'll also mention, as I have previously, that the combination of birds, all the different beasts, the reptiles, and mankind is probably an echo back once again to Genesis 1:21 through 22, plus maybe a bit of chapter 2 as well, reminding us of the extent of creation that has now been brought to death, if you will. It's almost like we're back in Eden, where Adam was told, if you eat of the wrong fruit, dying you shall die. Of course, there's grace that enters into that picture, but death was the consequence for sin, and then earth ends up being cursed. Now we see that play out here in Genesis 7, where indeed death, thanatos, or the apothnesko here, is brought upon everything as the result of mankind's spiral into sin. So again, just reiterating this idea that the creation account is clearly in view in Genesis 6 and 7, and is now seeing the reversal of the blessedness of creation with this destruction of all things. So anyhow, don't want to belabor the point. Genesis 7:21 is in the books. Thanks for tuning in.